Hi, my name is Kimberly from Zebra Development. Today I'm going to show you how to import data from Constant Contact into Razor's Edge using Importacular. So the first thing you'll need to do is open up the plugin in the plugins area of Razor's Edge, select Constant Contact from the available data sources and click Start. We'll then be able to select either updates to our lists in Constant Contact or our campaign results. So let's start by looking at our campaign results. I can then select the campaign I want to work with, and I can choose which data I want to bring in from that specific campaign. So I can work with either bounced, clicked, not opened, and so on. I'm going to bring over all of our opened emails in this scenario. So all of the data from people who opened the email has been downloaded. I've got 8 records to review. And in order to review those, I'm going to need to create a mapping template. I've got one already set up, so let's take a look at that and see what I've created here. So when you open up the mapping areas, you can see all the different areas of Razor's Edge along the top, and within those, all the different areas in which we can create mappings on the left-hand side. We have to have a constituent mapping for all imports, as this is the record that matches with our Razor's Edge records or creates new ones. Because I'm bringing in my email opens, I'm assuming that I'm only going to be updating existing Razor's Edge records. So I'm just using some of these to look up the appropriate person in Razor's Edge. So when I open up the constituent record, you can see I've mapped the first name and the last name and any other required fields. So on the left-hand side, if it's got a green tick, then we know this field's required by Razor's Edge. We see all the Razor's Edge fields, and then we select a source name. So if we click on the drop down here, we can see all the available fields coming over from Constant Contact, and we can put those anywhere we like in Razor's Edge. So this is just quite a basic record. I've got first name and last name. And again, I'm just using those to look up those people in Razor's Edge. I've also used the email address as a lookup as well. So when I open this one up, we can see I'm using the email address with the type of email to find matching constituents in Razor's Edge. And then I want to bring in the fact that I've sent them the email and that they've opened it as an action. So I can do that in the actions area. You can see that I've got options for actions and attributes, notepads and solicitor mappings. So let's take a look at my action. Once again, we can see we've got the required fields on the left and all the fields you would ordinarily fill in when you create an action in Razor's Edge. So I've got the action date, I've got the campaign and the category. And we can see on the left, we've got some options for default values. So these are not related to the data I'm bringing in from this campaign. This is stuff that I can set up as an automatic fill. So all of the people for this particular email are going to my capital campaign. They have a category of emails, which I've selected from my Razor's Edge code table. I filled in the priority and the type, and I can obviously fill in as many other fields as I want to for this particular action. Now that I've created the action, I can also add the opens and the campaign ID as action attributes. So I've set up the tracking activity type here, and I've selected this to be an opened email. And what I've done with the tracking activity is I've transformed it, because the description for an email opened is either a check or a not checked box. So if we take a look at the settings area, we can see that when the data comes over that says opened from Constant Contact, I'm going to check that box. And if it doesn't come over as opened, I'm going to leave that box unchecked. I've also created the campaign ID. And the reason that I want to bring the campaign ID over is that if I then want to, say, bring over all of the people who clicked on that campaign, I can add them to this existing action and match on that campaign ID rather than creating a new action with the clicks on as well. Okay, so let's save that template. I'm just going to create a control report, and this control report shows me any errors there might be during the processing. And we can choose to only process a shorter number of records as well if we want to, which is really useful when we're getting started with our mapping templates. I'm going to create a Razor's Edge query of my new and updated constituents. And here we can see all of the records that I'm going to update in Razor's Edge. So we can see the person who I'm going to be updating here, and we can see the matched record that's been found in Razor's Edge at the bottom. And all of these are showing to update existing Razor's Edge records. I can, however, check all of the incoming data on each of the tabs along the top here, so I can take a look at that action and make sure everything looks as I would expect. The same with the campaign ID and the opens as well. Now, before I import that, I can validate it, and that will just check that everything's going to go into Razor's Edge as I would expect. So let's run the validation. Everything's updated. If there were any errors, you could see the number here and you could check the control report. But as there aren't, let's untick the validate box and import it now. Here's my query I'm going to save. And now let's go and find that query. And we can see we've got 3 updated constituents as we were expecting. Let's take a look at this one. So if we go to the Actions tab, you can see my action's been added here. So that's the basic information that I put in. We've also got the campaign ID as an attribute, and the fact that the email has been opened is yes. So let's go back to the plugin. So now let's bring in some changes that have been made to our audience lists by our constituents. So we can see any new signups that have happened to our list, and we can bring those into Razor's Edge and add them as constituents. But if anybody in our audience has also updated their information, we can bring those changes into Razor's Edge as well. So let's take a look. So again, we select constant contact. Now we're going to select from one of our lists. And we can bring in people with a particular status, or we can just bring in everyone, which is what I'm going to do. And I can choose the date the changes were last made from as well. This will automatically show the last date you ran the import, but you can change it. So we've got 3 records to review. I've got a different campaign template for this, so let's have a look. So once again, I've mapped the constituent details in order to find existing records in Razor's Edge, but also so that I can create these fields for any new records. So I've got the first name and the last name, which are my required fields. I've also got my primary addressee and salutations as well set up, and I've used default values from my Razor's Edge code table there as well. I've created a constituent code for new constituents because in order to create a new record in Razor's Edge, I have to have a constituent code. So I've done this entirely using default values. And I've also set up consent record to show that this person has opted in. So I've got the opt-in date and the opt-in source coming over from constant contact. In the address tab, I've set up the email, the phone, and the postal address, so I can bring in all of those for new constituents. But also, if somebody made changes to those on their constant contact account, I can bring in those changes to Razor's Edge too. Okay, so let's bring in some of that data. So now I'm going to create a control report, and this will just show us any errors there might be in our processing. And I want to create a query of new and updated constituents so I can easily find them. Now I've got 3 records here that I need to make some decisions about. The first record is asking me to decide, and that means it's found a match in Razor's Edge, but it doesn't know which of these 2 matches it should be updating. A quick look shows me that the address for the second one matches, so if I select that, it will change to update, and I'll update this record with the new information from constant contact. The second record is also an update. It's found an existing record. It doesn't have an address here, but I've got one to add, so I'm going to do that as part of my import. And the last record is a brand new record, so there's no Razor's Edge record, and it's going to create a new one. You can obviously change this action by clicking on the drop down. You can ignore it altogether if you don't want to import it, or you can change an update to create or vice versa. Now let's have a look at every single data point that we're going to bring into Razor's Edge so we can check it before we run that process. So if I go to the constituent tab, I can see the name, I can see the addressee and salutation options for the constituent. I can see that I'm going to add the friend constituent code, and I can see that I'm going to add the opt-in consent record as well. On the address tab, I've got postal addresses here, email addresses, and also mobile phone numbers if they've been given to me. With the address, I've noticed an error, and because this is a text field, I can really easily just change it by double clicking in here and making a change. So you can do that with any text field. We could also set that up in the settings so that it always comes in as proper case as well if we wanted to. Now, before I import it, I can validate it. And that, again, just allows me to make sure that any changes going in are doing so appropriately. So let's do that. The little pencils mean that they've been successfully updated, and the checkbox means that the record will successfully be created. So let's close that, untick the checkbox, and import those now. Here's my query of my new and updated records. And now let's go and take a look at the records in Razor's Edge. So here are our 3 records. The first one we've got is our updated record. We can see that we've got his phone number and email address in here. We've got our default constituent code of friend, but our main update is that we've added our consent record for constant contact here with our consent date. If we take a look at our brand new record, we can see that we've added this new record in Razor's Edge, added a postal address, an email address, and our constituent code of friend. And we've also added that consent record as well, showing that this person's opted in to our constant contact newsletter. I hope that shows you how easy it is to bring in your data from Constant Contact to Razor's Edge. Thanks for listening.